Thanks for agreeing to do this.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to.
Okay, so can you begin telling what are some of the common challenges that women working in the field of science have to face?
I would say that challenges for women are pretty common across professions.
Okay.
I don't think there's anything specific to science. Perhaps, in fact, science is more accommodating for the constraints women have at times in their life, such as maternity leave and so on. Scientific experiments and the projects, and typically scientific jobs, are very flexible. They are the ultimate flexi-hour job because you can never tell when an idea will come.
Hmm.
So I have, for example, really benefited from this flexibility because I would wake up in the middle of the night when I was on maternity leave and send emails and organize projects and look at my students' data on the computer. And I was able to do a lot of things as and when time permitted without physically being at work. So in that sense, science is a very positive career for women who want to do science, that is. The constraints that women face are pretty common across professions.
Okay.
The sexism you face, the sort of subtle biases that people don't even know. Even the most nice and decent and reasonable of people will have inherent biases that they are not aware of. That's, I would say, a social kind of problem
Hmm.
that has nothing to do specifically with science, but I think it's inherent everywhere.
Hmm. And to what extent would you say does these challenges contribute to the problem of attrition of women in science? And when would you say does this begin to take place?
Let's see, I think you have to go back much earlier than the data actually shows. So the data might show that there is a reasonable number of women in science in undergraduate education levels, right? The numbers are. Um, but the preset road that you are going to take, even though you might take up science as an undergrad, the preset road that you're on is decided much, much, much earlier before you're even aware of it. I think by the time a girl is 12 years old, I think unconscious sort of settings happen in your mind that are influenced by your family, by what people say, by, discussions you might have with your friends. And even though you might end up in science and engineering, the long-term path that you've started and the long-term compromises you're going to make begin to take uh, root and begin to grow in your mind at a very, very young age. You will hear, most well-meaning people telling you that, you should learn to manage this or that because how will you juggle family and this and that later on, which is
Hmm.
a completely reasonable thing to say on the face of it.
Yeah.
But only a girl gets told this, right? So this subtle
Hmm.
message or not so subtle message that, a girl's life is going to be more complicated. How will you learn to manage? How will you learn continuously? You see role models around you. You see um, you know, older men in your family or in your surroundings live in a different way than the women around them. You
Yeah.
will see who fills plates of food and brings it out for people to eat. You will see
Hmm.
many, many small, small things, and the perception that your life is going to be more complicated than your brothers or the boys around you begins to factor in. I think the settings of this are probably in place long before the person ever comes to the PhD program. The settings of this are probably in place, right around puberty. I'd like to tell a story that bears on this.
Yeah.
I remember my 10th standard school there was some function, there was some dance party or something, prom. I went to St. Joseph's Colaba, and I remember one of the guys in my class with whom I would often compete for who gets more in maths. I used to love maths. So I remember he took me aside and said, Shubha, I have something to tell you. Okay? And he says, you're so good at studies and you do so well and, you're amazing at everything. I said, okay, thank you. And he says, in life, you should find some boy who is well suited to you and you should learn his business and his things and then you should help him in his life. This is actually paraphrasing what he said. I remember it so well. I won't name him, poor man, though I remember his name too. I looked jaw-droppingly at him. You know, you really think the purpose of my life is to, use all my talents to support some guy in his career? I mean, I certainly will support whoever I am with in his career, but shouldn't there be a more equal definition of this? So, you see, we were in the 10th standard, we were 14, 15 years old. And this guy already had his mental settings as to what a woman's role in life should be. And he was my friend. He was actually, thinking he was admiring me and complimenting me. And he was thinking he was giving me some useful advice. I mean, I remember he actually said, you have a lot of potential energy, turn it into kinetic energy, one of these, cute little physics jokes. So he was actually trying to be very positive, and this was his version of being positive to a woman colleague. Okay, so extremely well-meaning, but see what he said. Okay, so the set points come in very, very early. When someone like this grows up and looks for a spouse, you know what they're going to be looking for. And sadly enough, there are many women who have told themselves this advice. They didn't need people to tell them. They've already told it to them. That, as they go on in life, they need to find a partner who will allow them to study or allow them to work, all these lovely words.
And how did you personally attack this problem of internal bias?
I suspect I personally attacked the problem by being utterly thick-skinned and impervious to it. It's not like I didn't face these things. So I had a wonderful mother. She's no more. She was an amazing role model. She believed that, challenges make life more interesting kind of thing. But she was very aware of all these biases and unconscious. She would in fact tell me that a woman's life is very different and difficult and, how much I have to learn to this and that. And all along, I would sort of in my mind have this, resentment. Why should it be like that? It won't be so for me because I won't let it be so, was my very naive and very obstinate approach to the problem. I suppose that has helped me. One of our earlier emails, I think you had asked that, how is it that I never felt any specific, female-specific challenges until I became a mother? I don't think the challenges weren't there. I think I was able to be impervious or thick-skinned about them.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. As a St. Xavier student, I was interviewed for one of the Junior College Best Student Award or something. Okay, and I remember the interview went very well, I thought, and one of the committee members, actually a very senior woman official, asked me what I wanted to do in life, and at the time I was considering going into medicine because I had a love of biology, and at the time I thought if you like biology, you do medicine. I think that's what many young people think today. I didn't end up doing medicine, but that's what I said. And she said, well, how do you propose to face all the challenges that you will face being a woman in a very competitive field? And do you think that there will be, obstacles in your path and so on? Now, my mindset was that, life is full of obstacles and, one deals with them. What is there to get inhibited or daunted about? Obstacles are dealt with. I didn't say that though. Because I was sort of the mind that when you meet an obstacle, you deal with it, and why make a big deal about it? I simply said, I don't see any obstacles specific to women in professions. I've seen women do everything that they want to do, and I'm going to do what I want to do. Now, in hindsight, this could be interpreted as, self-confidence and everything. But I think it sounded at the time certainly just naive and unaware of the situation. I mean, see, I had seen my mother struggle in a very difficult profession. So she and her younger sister, my dear Meena Maushi, who is also no more, they decided that to take turns, one would study and one would work. So she struggled. My aunt Meena Maushi also struggled. So I've had these wonderful role models, right? So for me, problems are just part of life. They weren't something to be made a big deal of. So, that's what I very naively said back when I was 16 years old. And I guess that approach at least was in some ways self-fulfilling. So if you behave as if, problems are a normal part of life, then you're better able to deal with them when they come.
That's great that such an approach has been helpful to you. But still, were there ever any moments of self-doubt when you questioned your capabilities to be successful? Because you have achieved a lot of recognition and awards for your work in the field of neuroscience. So were you always this confident of yourself in your work?
Okay, so I guess in the field of science, again, I have two answers. One, scientist is always in self-doubt. No, you're doubting your experiments until you've surely proven them. You're a seeker of the truth. So the only way to do that is to doubt and question all the time. Okay, so that's one answer. The other answer is to do with what is the definition of success. Okay, I believe I have succeeded when I have designed a beautiful, precise experiment that can answer a question.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if the answer turns out to be some fundamental, scientifically interesting thing, then it gets published in a very, very good journal. Then I get defined as successful. Then somebody down the road gives me an award. Okay, but my measure of success was how I designed the experiment. How I mentored the student to be able to come up with the right kind of question or the right kind of approach. So that is my success. So the awards come later. The award comes 5 years after the most exciting moment in your life, when your beautiful experiment has produced some unexpected result and you're sitting there excitedly discussing it and, trying to understand what it means. So that is the scientific high.
And when you're talking about scientific highs and what gets people excited, at TIFR as a professor and a mentor, have you observed any difference in the way men and women approach research opportunities?
Perhaps. Not all of them. See, a good scientist is a good scientist, and we have some gems of students who it's just a pleasure to work with, and you don't notice whether they are men or women. You just appreciate the good scientist. This said, some good students and some maybe average students of each gender, as they approach the end of their PhD, they begin to make life choices, and this may be differences in this. I've seen more than a few women compromise on where they will do their postdoc, which country they will do it in or which city and so on, based on the fact that their parents either don't want them to go too far or their parents want them to be married, or they have decided that they don't want to aim at a full-time research career. They want to, now that the PhD is done, they'll do a postdoc, but a short one, and then basically give it up and move to whichever city their husband is in, and so on. So I've seen women sort of not extract as much value from their training as they could because of these other considerations or maybe pressures.
And as a mentor and advisor at your institute, how do you encourage the female students to maintain a healthy balance between their professional and personal obligations?
I encourage everybody who works with me, men and women, to be themselves. To be themselves, to ask themselves, what do I want out of life? What do I want is a question that we rarely ask ourselves. What do you finally want? And oftentimes you have to be really, really persistent getting these people to define what they want. Most of the time you will have people say, well, I'll do this and then I will see. And this I will see is very nebulous. Trying to get somebody to crystallize it into words is actually helping them. So people have come back and thanked me afterwards saying how persistent you were, and finally I know what I want because of you. So I don't recommend anything to them, but I ask them to think, what do you want? What do you want? Decide what's important to you. Tell me what's important to you and I will do my best to help you get there, is what I usually say. That's the best I can do. And let's see, I've had a couple of postdocs who've had babies during their postdoctoral stint. So I hired JRFs to support their work so that, they could come in late when they were tired, they could leave early, or after the baby came, they could, come and go as they wished, and the work could continue if they gave their JRF instructions. So I sort of allowed that supportive arrangement right from, before the baby came to long after.
Okay.
So these are the ways you can help women who are at a time of life when they don't really have too many options in terms of their time. I mean, a baby is a baby, and it's, possibly the most wonderful thing that happens in life, at least my opinion. So, I encourage them to enjoy it because, finally when you're 60 years old, you will not remember every single, gel you ran or DNA you prepped, but you will remember those precious early moments. So trying to help them have the best of both worlds is, I think, the best thing one can do for them. So that's what I try and do.
That's great how you try to make it easier for women at your personal level. Now, can you please talk about how at a social and institutional level have things progressed or changed in the past 20 years that you have been working in this field?
Progress and change. So I have two answers to that. Okay, on the grand scale, sort of society, the perception, and so on, that takes a long, long time to change. That doesn't change easily. Generations have to pass by. So, in some sense, growing older has helped because people treat younger women differently than older women. So, in our culture, one of the strengths of having age is that age comes with a certain level of respect, and finally you get gray hair, so people stop thinking of you as, this young thing. Women are typically not perceived as senior as they should be perceived, as not perceived to have leadership potential when they have it, just because they portray leadership very differently. So these problems continue, and yet there have been definite changes. For example, there is this biomedical funding initiative by the Wellcome Trust from the UK in partnership with the Department of Biotechnology, Government of India, and they fund fellowships for researchers at many levels. Okay, postdoctoral and upwards, professor, principal investigator levels. One of the most amazing experiences was perhaps 7-8 years ago when I was on the interview committee for one of these very prestigious and highly funded fellowships. And one of the people, candidates shortlisted for this interview, so there is an application, a detailed grant application, thorough international review, and then shortlisted applicants get called for interview. One of the applicants had just had a baby, and there was no way she was going to travel. Just means like a week prior kind of thing. There was no way she was going to be able to travel for the interview date. Now, this was the change that I saw in the Indian system. I know that there continue to be sort of situations, agencies where if you can't go for the interview, then you don't have a chance at getting whatever it is you're interviewing for. This is just black and white. There is no question. This particular situation, however, said, "Oh my, she can't travel. There's no, and this is a absolutely acceptable reason for not being able to travel. So we will interview her by Skype." And so Skype was set up. We interviewed the candidate, and she did brilliantly well, so we gave her the award. And this was completely normal life as usual. So this is a change. Now, I don't know how many agencies do this, but at least this one, the Welcome DBT India Alliance, this one did and continues to. There are benefits. Maternity leave benefits have increased. I think it's changed from 4.5 months to 6 months maternity leave. This is across the board now. Some organizations allow for childcare support. 2000 was it that it became mandatory that every organization of a certain size had to have an on-campus creche or daycare center. So in fact, TIFR started its daycare center then in compliance with the rule. So things are improving step by step, tiny steps at a time. But I think the best improvement will come from simply a large number of women just pushing the envelope. Because when you push, then people realize that, reasonable, normal, intelligent, functional adults have needs that are different from what was expected or what fit the male professionals. So pushing the envelope helps, and that is my sort of request or plea to all women of all ages and all categories. If you think that something is unfair or inappropriate or, needs to change, just push. You may not actually change it that one time, but that push will help crumble the wall eventually.
Yes, there certainly has been changes, and also specifically when we see the number of enrollment of female students in science increase over the years. But even then, there's this huge bias in the kind of streams within science that they opt for. For example, a study by Elsevier in 2012 showed that in India, number of female students in biology, medical science, and life sciences is 80.4, but while that in engineering and physics is only 32%. So how do you explain this huge difference, and what do you think should be done to tackle it?
Wow, this is a huge difference indeed. Students should do whatever it is they want to do. I think job opportunities have now exploded. No longer are potential career options limited to what was 40 years ago. No longer should parents worry about what scope there is in this or that or the other field. I think students should find what their subject of interest is and pursue it. Now, I do not believe that there is an inherent difference of interest amongst women and men, girls and boys in school in different subjects. So I think perhaps what's happening is early on this interest is either being curtailed, curbed, not encouraged, uh, subtle ways, teachers, adults, parents, family encouraging girls and boys in different directions, or peer groups. If you get a wrong answer and people laugh at you, you might feel more inhibited to try again, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think the interest level may not be that different, but what one does with the interest and how it is encouraged is probably one major cause or a root cause in this dichotomy of numbers coming up at the undergraduate level.
And how can we tackle this problem socially and institutionally?
I think perhaps role models, bringing in role models from different walks of life and exposing students to what is possible, would then allow them to take the stand and say, no, this is what I want to do.
Okay.
So, for example, if a school invited its alumni, alumni who have gone ahead and established careers in anything, it doesn't really have to be the sciences, in anything, just alumni of both genders who are fantastic, say, lawyers or fantastic researchers, biomedical sciences or in physics, and if both genders come in and talk to students about their life path of what they did, where they did, the struggles they had, the problems they faced, I think schools could indulge in these kind of mentorship sessions. And if you call back people who are not that much older, who have left school, say, within the last 10 years, then the students still feel a sense of connection and, okay, these people are not really, really old. They've just left school not that long ago. So such role models may be able to touch young lives and plant the idea that, hey, this is possible. So I would encourage this happen at the school level. So any school principals who are listening or teachers who are listening, do call up your alumni. They'd love to come, I'm sure.
I'm sure people who are listening to this would heed your advice. Now, any last words for women who might be underconfident to take up science?
Underconfident to take up science.
What would you say to them? Yeah.
My thoughts would be that, you may have pressures of multiple kinds, whether one feels able to take them on or not, whether your family is going to be supportive or not, whether, there are other constraints in life. Life is full of constraints, right? But I would say when you're 70 years old and you look back, you should have no regrets. You should be able to say, I did the best I could at the time, given all the constraints I had. And I made all the choices as best as I could. Maybe I didn't have all the information I could have had, but I did the best I could at the time. No regrets. I did something that was fulfilling to me.